Welcome to Nightmare Hall. Enter if you dare. I'm excited to share this book with you today. I had so much fun reading it. This review is a little bit different. This is the kind of book that you would find at your Scholastic book fair back in the day. And it has some kind of horror themes. And I'm going to completely spoil the book. So if you want to read it, this may not be... Well, I guess maybe you could just stop listening at a certain point if you wanted to not find out what happens in the end, or you may want to read it and come back, something like that. And this is aimed at adults who read this book back in the day, rather than, this is maybe not so much for child readers, just to give you a little heads up there. So this book is in the Point Horror publishing house, which... These books were aimed at young adults, and they're horror fiction books. When I was looking up the sort of history of point horror, it came up that this particular point horror was popular amongst teenage girls more than boys. That's not my experience at all. I actually think maybe it's a little bit the other way, but I could be wrong. So if you've read this one, I would love to know if you think that point horror was more for boys or girls, or if it was just for teens in general, because I'd just be interested to know what you think. Point Horror was launched in 1991. It's by Scholastic, and authors who published under the label of Point Horror include some names you'll recognize, like R.L. Stine's probably one of the more remembered authors, Christopher Pike, Caroline Cooney, and obviously Diane Hoh, who is the author of our book today. So Nightmare Hall is a little bit unusual in that this book was the first in a series that had an ongoing story world that you would sort of come back to in other titles. I haven't read other titles in the series, so I don't know if they're all sort of at the same time or if there's character overlap or anything like that. But they weren't standalone stories. And this Nightmare Hall series were all written by Diane Hoh. This one is the Silent Scream, so the first one in the series. The Silent Scream is such a great title. It's so of its time to me, I think. I don't know if you've ever seen a picture of Diane Hoh. She is kind of adorable. She has such a sweet, happy face in pictures of her, and I love it because I think she clearly has a sense of humor, and she's just, her career is based around these teen horror series. So just to kind of go back to that young adult genre, back in the day, at a certain point, there weren't really young adult books. There were children's books and then adult books. And there was kind of this in-between market that started to be tapped. And I think for a lot of people, V.C. Andrews was kind of the first books that maybe fit into what we would now consider to be YA. But I think what's notable about a lot of these, point horror or even Goosebumps, these books are quite short. They're not... Young adult fiction now often is much more, I'd say maybe sophisticated is the word, more complex plotting, a bit longer. And I think YA now appeals to people who are in their 20s. And obviously anyone can read young adult fiction. There's no stigma around it. And if there is, there shouldn't be. Whereas these were sort of more short reads, just designed to get kids and teens reading. So they're not very long reads. And they're a little bit simple. Maybe. I don't mean that in a bad way, because I love these books. I think they're fun and so of their time, which is why we're talking about them. This one came out in 1993. It's fairly early on in this space where books were being designed for book fairs, which is, I love those. And they were designed in these series so that there were short reads, but you would keep buying them. Or swapping them with friends as well. You'd be like, oh, this one was really scary, or this one was really sad, whatever, and kind of get them swapping with friends. And in a way, it was genius marketing, obviously. And it was a great way to get kids talking about things and get them reading. I remember swapping Goosebumps books with people and things like that, in that age group. Yeah. One of the really fun things that I kind of wanted to mention about this book is the cover. So my cover is, I think, might be the UK cover. It's got this nice sort of red color, nice dramatic, spooky red, and the rope coming down, as you can see, which is sort of plays a part in the story. But the other cover, which I actually think is better and was probably more well known, is the ones that have like a little window cut out in them. So you have the front cover, and sometimes it would open and there'd be sort of a picture on the inside that was you could partly view it through a hole in the front cover. And often they had, because it was this era of fluorescent kind of colors, that have these sort of almost like graffiti-esque fonts and things like that. And they're just so fun, so appealing. And I rate them pretty highly. I honestly, I will buy a book because it's point horror, because I kind of know what I'm getting into and it's fun and it's a bit of escapism or nostalgia. But those covers will get me every time. I'll always want to pick up those book covers. Yeah. The other thing is that while these books were accessible for younger readers, they also weren't crazy expensive. I think the idea was that maybe you could even spend your pocket money on them. They sort of got expensive once you started buying a lot of them. And there were always a lot in the series. So, yeah, but like I said, you could sort of swap them with friends. They're very much in the commercial fiction style of writing. But what I remember with a lot of these books, but it's probably especially the horror ones, is it was just cute how grown up you felt when you read them. The point horror is more, I feel like there were maybe sort of little age groupings for these books. They weren't necessarily strict. You'd often get ones aimed at slightly younger reader, and then sort of like a grade school reader maybe. And then you would get the sort of where the characters were 12 or 13, and then a slightly thicker version. So if you think of like Goosebumps, and then you would have Fear Street. So point horror is in that Fear Street kind of thickness. It's for a slightly older reader. And in the younger books, they tended to avoid people dying in the horror ones, at least. But in the ones that for slightly older readers like this one, sometimes there could be death, or death could be talked about. Speaking of death, this book does revolve around a suicide. So this may not be for some readers. It is a horror book, and it is aimed at a younger audience. It's not deeply upsetting, but it's okay if you don't want to read about that stuff. It was something that was very talked about in the 90s. So to quote the book, the house mother who found Giselle McKendrick hanging from the brass light fixture in her bedroom didn't scream. When she entered the room on the second floor of Nightingale Hall and found Giselle suspended, swaying gently above the shiny hardwood floor, Isabel Coates' mouth opened in horror, but she made no sound. For several minutes, the only sound in the bright and sunny room came from the birds outside, screeching in the huge oak trees, shadowing the tall, skinny old brick house. Sheer white curtains at the narrow windows moved gently, ghost-like, stirred by a warm June breeze. So that's how we open. We're right in there. There's no time to mess around. This opening prologue is great. We just dive right in. You get a real sense of the sleeping house. And yeah, it's amazing, basically. So our main character is Jessica. She has navy blue eyes and glossy black hair. And I just love how characters are described in these books. It's really funny. They're always kind of like this. A lot of people in this book are described as too good looking, or good looking is kind of a phrase we hear a lot. People's eye color is described in very unlikely terms and hair color. And the names are just kind of amazing. We have Ian Banyan. He's too good looking. Meaning he has a ponytail. He pretentiously carries a camera everywhere, according to where we meet him. But then later on, he doesn't actually carry the camera with him everywhere. He wears cutoffs, and he rates Gone with the Wind pretty highly, and fishing. There's another guy called John who has money, so he wears knit shirts, navy slacks, and has wheat-colored hair. And he looks like a male model. So my initial thought was that he was going to die first, but will he? We'll find out. There are more characters. They all get the same treatment. The guys all have broad shoulders and muscled arms, and the girls' legs generally get described, which is kind of funny. They're either tanned or long and stocky. Poor Kath, who I kind of like in this book, she described as would be pretty if she wasn't anxious. So those of you with anxiety out there, in 1993, anxiety makes you not pretty. That's so harsh. So like a classic kind of haunted house horror story, they move into Nightingale Hall because the death the previous spring, I think it is, of Giselle means that the dorm room is going cheap. So we have our sort of ragtag bunch of kids that move in. And then there is the handyman. His name is Trucker Swopes. I've never had that last name before, and I'll probably never hear it again. But yeah, he's just hanging around. Yeah, it was kind of interesting to me. I don't know about houses like this, like dorms and stuff. Where I grew up, we don't have that same system. But this place is spooky, and apparently the library is like stacked with books, which just immediately made me love this book as a whole. Jess, our lead character, she's not a fan of boys. She's a fan of work. Smiling at a compliment takes a lot on her part. She's not swayed by that stuff. She's not into arrogance. And yeah, we've been told. So Jess has always had to share a room with sisters, so she's excited to be here at college, and she decides that she's not going to complain about the odd, ghostly, unexplained chill in her room. She's just going to live with it because she's just happy to be, out and in the world. Now, I kind of like this book because a lot of books that are sort of this, like the Point Horror or Fear Street, they're more high school, and we get a lot of high school stories. And so I kind of like that this one's a college one. So I just kind of wanted to put that in there. So we meet Mrs. Coates again. She's the house mother from the prologue. And she's described as wearing a garish green and orange print dress, which I don't know why she would be doing that. We have Milo. He likes to write poetry by the river. In fact, in this book, we will never see him writing poetry. So we just sort of know that he does, which is very 90s, in my opinion. All the kids decide to have pizza together to get to know each other, which I kind of like, because this is sort of aimed at the target audience is slightly younger than the characters in the story. So they have pizza together, no booze, only soda. Yeah, just these kids, their first night. And one of the guys stands up and he decides to tell the story of somebody, Giselle's story, that somebody committed suicide in the house. And Jess figures out that it happened in her bedroom, which is, that'd be really quite scary if that happened to you. I think your first place out of home and somebody had died in the room under mysterious circumstances before you moved in. So when they decide to go in off the porch, Mrs. Coates is standing at the top of the stairs, and mysteriously she just falls down the stairs. Yeah, it kind of struck me like falling downstairs. You don't really hear about that in books anymore, but it used to be quite a big plot device in stories. I guess My Sweet Audrina springs to mind. But I mean, going back into the Victorian era, there used to be a lot of accidents on stairs. They could be quite dangerous. And it just sort of struck me because I was like, this is one of those things you don't see that in books that much anymore. But anyway, to move along, Mrs. Coates has dislocated something and she's going to be in hospital. So she's not going to be able to supervise them and be their chaperone, so to speak. So she begs Jess, our main character, to promise to call someone to come and stay with them. She has a phone number for a friend who can cover for her. But the kids all talk and they decide that they'll have more fun not having an adult around. And meanwhile, the electricity goes out and the wind howls around the house. And I just kind of love this house. I love a haunted house story. So Jess, immediately, this is kind of her character at the start of the book. She goes upstairs to make cooking and cleaning rosters because that's the kind of person she is. And it's funny because I kind of realized reading that out loud, she does this, but then it seems like she never posts them anywhere and nobody ever talks about it again and nobody sticks to the cleaning roster or whatever. So that kind of tracks. But anyway, she's fast asleep and then she's awoken by a scream. And when she talks to everybody, nobody else heard the scream except for her. So Trucker, the handyman, encourages them not to get supervision. And he's just hanging around with them like a bad smell. Like, he is supposed to be about their age. So he's not like an older handyman. He's maybe like a year or two older than them. But it's kind of, I was just like, yeah, that's not suspicious at all. Just hanging out, even though like you're the handyman. I guess he lives nearby, sort of thing, like on the property. Milo tells everybody he had a dream about Kim Basinger, which really dates the book for us as to what era we're in. But I kind of love Kim Basinger, so I kind of wanted to mention that. They head to campus to register for classes and all that kind of stuff. And a mean girl is mean to them about living in the dead girl's house. So they all learn that Giselle's death was ruled a suicide. The school seemed to want the investigation to be over, but it may have been a murder. I think it's cute that their parents were just happy for them to have a cheap place to stay at Nightingale Hall. The university is awesome. It's called Salem University. I kind of wondered if there was a Salem University, but Jess gets a Salem University sweatshirt later on in the book. And I was like, I want a Salem University sweatshirt. I want that. I don't care if it's a real place or not. Our heroes decide not to tell anyone where they're living so that they don't become social outcasts, because there's a bit of a kind of stigma around them living in the house. And it's cute. Jess is excited to be entering adulthood. So to quote from the book again, one of the characters, Ian, look at it this way. You've registered for classes and bought your books. You're now an official college student. So do you feel any different than you did in high school? Yeah, I feel a lot poorer. But as they began walking across campus towards the highway, she realized that she did feel different. Older? No, not really. Maybe more free, a little more independent, out on her own, away from family, responsible now for herself. Very scary thought, that responsible part, but exciting too. I just thought that was nice, that little passage there. I remember that feeling when I was a teenager or, into that kind of college age. It's just a nice feeling. And I know I liked how the book kind of highlighted that a little bit. And I wondered maybe what that would have felt like. I think people could have related to that who were the target age for this book in that time period. Anyway, Jess calls Madeline, who is the adult, who is relieved to get out of chaperoning them. In fairness, they are adults. They are college age. But also, in fairness, there was a potential murder and haunting in the house. So, I don't know. I feel like by that age, for me, I was sort of out on my own, really. But I guess it's different when you're at college. You probably need someone to make sure you don't do anything too crazy. So it turns out one of Jess's secondhand textbooks belonged to Giselle. It made me think of how first-hand textbooks are such a scam. Textbooks are expensive, and they're not recyclable. And this is such a such a digression, but often they just change like one little thing in a textbook so that you have to buy it new every year so they can make money. And I just think that's so stupid, because often those changes don't necessarily need to be made, but you're expected to get the most up-to-date textbook, and sometimes they're like $100 or more. And I don't know, I guess I'm just sympathizing with Jess because she worked hard to save some money so she could go to college. And I'm just going to move on. I like this little moment here where she gets this book and it was Giselle's. I think that's something that would freak me out if this happened to me. And even though it's not sort of horror movie level scary, I think it works for the audience it's intended for, and it really builds tension really, really well. Like, I think that's kind of a good little moment. Our cast of characters all cook together. The kitchen seems like it's just going to generally be a trash heap for the duration of the book, and they barely keep on top of it. And I liked that little bit of realism because that's kind of what it's like. Jess suggests they go explore the local hangouts. They're kind of bonding as a group a little bit. Milo disdains to join them. Here he is described as having unruly beige hair, which is weird. Can hair even be beige? But whatever, it's fine. He's going night fishing, and Linda, one of the girls in the house who has a crush on him, is a little bit disappointed. It's quite cute. This book has a lot of crushes between characters and things, and I kind of enjoyed that. It was fun. They decide to use paper plates, and Jess feels bad for the environment. Well, you should, Jess. That's using paper plates and just throwing them out. That's not great. But, maybe it's better than the alternative in this particular situation. In town, they bump into Trucker, who tells them he's taking a few night courses, so he's sort of one of them now, which is fine, I guess. At this point, Jess notices he's kind of cute. They are in I think they're at a pizza parlor, but I was going to say they're in a bar because that's where you would be in reality, but whatever. They decide to take a picture together in a photo booth because mobile phones don't exist yet, so they can't take a selfie. And when Jess is in there with Ian, their picture comes out with a third girl ghostishly sort of in the back of the photo with Jess and Ian. Ian dismisses this as a double exposure, but is it? I mean, that's such a cool visual. John, the rich guy, decides to be like a little bit more human than he sometimes is in this book. He's sometimes a bit of a sort of jock, rich boy stereotype. But he talks about how a girl dumped him once with a cassette tape, like over a cassette tape. I love it. It's just kind of made me laugh partly because of mixtapes. People used to make mixtapes for each other back in the day. You would put a mix of songs, sometimes recorded off the radio. People did it on CD as well. But this is talking about cassette tape in this book. And it would just be songs that maybe you kind of almost like wanted to dedicate to your friend, or maybe that were for somebody you liked or had a crush on or something. But in this case, and this is so harsh, this girl went to all the effort of making him a mixtape, and it just has a song on it about like a girl dumping a guy. And that's how she tells him she wants to break up with him. And it's just harsh, like not necessarily kind of detailed, but it's a nice little sort of funny anecdote within the context of the story. So they get home from this little outing, and the basement door flies open by itself, and Jess notices a weird smell. Foreshadowing or misdirect? But then the book just says they get busy with school and they kind of settle in. So basically, by this point, Trucker is kind of almost moved in. I think he's got like a shed he lives in, but he's in their basement all the time. And Kath is an overachiever, so she's just like working herself to the bone to stay ahead. We've learnt before that she has like these intense parental expectations sort of put on her, and just kind of fears around that. that she might not be successful. So then her handwritten assignment goes missing when she's in her room and she just turns her back and it's gone. And she absolutely flips. She ends up accusing Milo because he has the same class as her. And she just goes into his room and starts trashing it, like ransacking it, looking for this paper that she wrote. Jess suspects that the house and its kind of crazy, spooky atmosphere is affecting Kath. And we get this little tidbit that Linda has actually been in the house before for orientation. So it's kind of this thing of like, why would you not mention that? Jess and Ian are sort of teaming up a little bit, getting kind of close. There's a little something going on between the two of them. And Jess speculates that Milo is a creepy weirdo. So there isn't anything specific here that she notices about him. It's just a feeling. I guess you got to trust your gut sometimes. So suspicion's kind of thrown around a little bit here. Could Milo, Trucker, Kath sort of, we're supposed to be a bit suspicious of them, but it's not really clear suspicious about what. It's just a kind of somebody knows something, I guess, kind of a thing. At this point, my money was kind of on Trucker as being a misdirect. And I thought maybe Ian was the bad guy because Jess is our main character and she's kind of getting close to Ian. And I was like, that may be like, maybe we're supposed to like his kind of, that he's nice to her. And I don't know. But we will find out. Suddenly there's mention of a dance, the fall ball. It's kind of weird. Jess really wants John to ask her. And she's thinking about that when a military guy in full uniform turns up on their doorstep, and he is Giselle's brother. He's found out that there is a trunk of her stuff basically left behind, but he's in uniform. Like, why is he just in uniform? I don't know. It's kind of weird. He came straight from the war to pick up his sister's stuff because it's been there for like 6 months at this point. I don't know. Anyway, if you were wondering, his legs are not described, but his hair is straw colored. And at this point, he recognizes Milo. So it turns out Milo not just knew Giselle personally, but went to school with her and practically lived at their house growing up. So he's an old friend of the family. And then just out of nowhere, Giselle's brother kind of leans into Jess and says, you know, Giselle didn't commit suicide. And it's just out of nowhere. Like, she said, I'm sorry for your loss. And he was like, she didn't kill herself, complete stranger. It's really random. And I kind of love that about these books. They're cheesy. It's great. So they all confront Milo. I don't know. I kind of feel for Milo in this little situation because I don't know if I would mention that I knew her either. They were sort of best friends until high school. And then she became popular and they just weren't friends anymore. Different friends. She met an out-of-town boyfriend. The out-of-town boyfriend thing is funny because it just seems like that kind of thing where it's like, yeah, I have a boyfriend, but he goes to another school. Anyway, Linda is described as having green hair at this stage. I think it's meant to be that because she has lighter colored hair and she swims. She's a swimmer. So I guess that means she has green hair. So Jess comes home to find muddy footprints leading into her room that kind of randomly stop. She cleans them up, and later that night, something wakes her up, and she sees the silhouette of Giselle's swinging body on the wall. To quote the book, something moving on the wall opposite the foot of her bed caught her attention. Something moving. Jess gasped in horror and instinctively yanked the purple bedspread up to her chest in a protective motion. She sat perfectly still, her eyes making round O's of disbelief as she stared in shocked silence. The wall in front of her moved with the clear, unmistakable shadow of a body swinging back and forth from the light fixture, sorry. So essentially, she wakes up and sees that silhouette against the wall. She screams and everyone rushes in, but nobody sees anything. So they all just decide to go to a party. That kind of tracks with that kind of age group, right? This is a party where no one drinks, does drugs, or has sex. In case you were wondering, that's the kind of parties that people have in Point Horror. They wear name tags, unusually, and talk about frats and sororities. This cracked me up when I was reading it. I don't know, it was just funny to me. Jess meets somebody who tells her that she saw someone physically fighting with Giselle the night before she died. Somebody with long hair, like Ian perhaps, though this is just a hint. It's hilariously casual, this little mention that this woman makes. Like, she saw it, but she didn't go to the police about it. Or, I mean, this guy was kind of attacking Giselle, and that would have been like really unsettling to see that happen, I think. I mean, this person's meant to be a friend. I mean, she just kind of shrugs it off, like, isn't that weird that I saw that? Oh, well, it's just ridiculous. But anyway, we move on from there. John finally kisses Jess, but he doesn't ask her to the ball. Honestly, this ball that they're arranging, it sounds expensive. Like, you have to buy these expensive tickets, and it's like, I don't know, sounds like kind of a big deal. So I can understand that wouldn't be everybody's cup of tea. Jess looks around for the girl that she spoke to at the party the night before, but doesn't see her anywhere. I mean, that just kind of goes nowhere. Later, she's studying. Jess hears a scream, and she finds Linda holding a cut-up swimsuit. It's her uniform swimsuit she has to have for meets. So it being destroyed may actually affect her scholarship. It's kind of a big deal. She accuses Kath of doing it. So then we have a house divided. Yeah, Kath has this window that's kind of jammed shut, but when somebody tries to open it, it's actually not jammed shut, which means that she would have had fire escape access to Linda's room. So yeah, it's kind of clear that she was sort of framed here, and that kind of thing. The doors to these rooms that everyone's staying in, they have locks, but conveniently Trucker doesn't know where the keys are, so nobody can lock their doors, which is kind of, I don't know. It seems like it's important to the characters at some point, but also then they just forget about it, kind of thing. But yeah, Jess comes home the next from school, from class, and she finds her t-shirts have been moved, and somehow her drawer has been filled with worms. Worms. I don't know. It's kind of gross, but kind of just made me laugh. Like, I don't know. It seems like the 90s felt like worms were pretty scary. And it says worms. I'm like, is it just earthworms? Like, people in the house are into fishing. So I was like, I think maybe they mean like earthworms, but maybe they mean like maggots or something dramatic. Anyway, the boys, Trucker and Ian, they take the whole drawer out of her like chest of drawer unit thingy. And for some reason, it takes two of them to take the drawer out. I didn't really understand that. Also, Trucker thinks somehow they made their own way into her like drawer from the basement. Which I'm like, how? Like, is that a thing? Has that ever happened to anybody ever? And it kind of made me laugh. It was kind of this bit of a like hysterical woman. Like, they probably just made their own way in there. Like, why are you making a big deal out of this? Nobody put them there. Also, why is their basement full of worms? What's happening in this basement? Anyway, Jess decides that, or she suggests, like, let's get out of the house for a bit. And Trucker senses that she wants to be alone with Ian. So he kind of fades out, which is very emotionally intelligent of him to read the room like that. They're not alone long, though. They go to a place to eat, and the table is soon just crowded with random friends that they've made and people, you know. I just kind of felt a little bit bad for them. They've obviously gone somewhere to have a little date, and nobody is just acknowledging that they're trying to be on a date. So this little quote made me giggle. This is Ian talking, and he says, "I bummed around some last summer, hopped on my Harley and went exploring. It was fun, and it showed me that I could take care of myself." No wonder he seemed older, more self-confident than everyone else at Nightingale Hall. It wasn't just his height or build or his long hair. it was because he'd already been on his own for a while. End of quote. So apparently, long hair is a sign of maturity in 1993. But yeah, it just made me laugh. No mention of that camera that he's supposed to carry everywhere. And he just has a Harley, but he doesn't have it in the course of this story. It's just, that's the kind of guy he is. That really made me laugh. Anyway, later he also calls her, like on the next page, he refers to her as kiddo. I'm like, you're the same age. And who calls anybody kiddo anyway? Like, it was just icky. But what can I say? So, yeah, just to recap slightly, so far the girls' room have been gone through. We had the paper go missing. We had the swimsuit get cut up. And we have the worms in the drawer. None of the boys' rooms have been tampered with, or whatever you want to call it. They have not reported any of this to anybody, nor have they gotten keys for their door or gotten locks changed. Any of that kind of sensible stuff that you think that a person would do, kind of par for the course for this kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, basically the 90s was a different time. It was very, very innocent and whatever. And this is just a book, so it's not really necessarily what people would do. But yeah, so Linda is going to the library with Milo, and she wants some outfit advice, which I kind of love. I remember asking friends like, oh my gosh, I'm doing this. What should I wear? You know, I like that. She says how she never got a date ever before. She never had a date before because she's big. So I think in the context of the book, they mean like tall, athletic, maybe stocky. They're not referring to like her weight. But yeah, that sucks. She's an athlete. I mean, I think she sounds kind of cool, but the jocks aren't into that apparently. So yeah. Linda expresses sadness that Giselle committed suicide, and the mirror in her room explodes, sending deadly shards across the room, and they embed in the walls and furniture, which is very cool. No one's hurt. Trucker, being the kind of guy he is, I mean, everyone kind of rushes into the room when they hear the mirror breaking, and Trucker is just dismissive, like, maybe somebody threw a rock in the window. And yeah, sure, Trucker, maybe that's what happened. But now we know that Linda has also seen something weird, like Jess has. So they all go for pizza and a movie just to do something normal. And Kath flirts with Trucker to make John jealous because he's on a date with another girl. There's a bit of a Kath and John thing sort of happening at this point. Later, Jess finds a picture of Giselle in her room with the face like scribbled with marker over the face. And this came from under the worm drawer. Like when they pulled the drawer out, there were a couple of things under there. So yeah, there's also, she finds a creepy, threatening letter from an ex-lover who won't take no for an answer. And by that, I mean an ex-lover of Giselle's. But it's not signed with an actual name. She shows everyone the letter and the photo over breakfast the next day. Milo is obviously sort of affected by seeing this. Trucker is dismissive. And Ian warns her against looking for more letters that Jess thinks might be hidden somewhere. So yeah, Kath mentions the suicide again, and the cellar door slams open. So now we kind of get that any time someone calls it a suicide and not a murder, something like this happens. Linda is hoping Milo asks her to the ball. Jess says he doesn't seem like the type. But we get this little exchange between them, which I kind of liked. It was funny. I like his hair. I think he looks cool. Artistic. Artistic, Jess thought. Had Milo ever used a black marker in his artistic efforts? As in defacing a photograph? He had said that he and Giselle stopped being friends in high school, but he'd never said that was okay with him. Maybe it hadn't been. I just kind of loved that. Like, those kind of black markers are not specifically artistic in any way. They're more just like a practical thing for marking things. But I don't know. Throwing suspicion around. I like confetti. I love it. So yeah, Ian gets stroppy that Jess hasn't destroyed the letter and the photo. I mean, surely you would give that to the police. Surely you would report that to the police. Obviously, this is in a time before true crime podcasts, so people would not have that in their mind, maybe, but it does seem like a little bit of a flaw in the story, if we're being honest. So later that night, the wind and rain swirl around the house and they settle in by the fire in a group. Milo has his notebook and Linda kind of does that, playfully like, oh, what's in your notebook? And like takes it off him. And Kath's essay falls out. Drama. She's angry. He's angry. And Ian and Jess are kind of left alone after everybody else storms out. And he asks her to the dance. So seems like a good a time as any, I guess. The next night, everyone goes out, but Jess begs off with a headache to look for clues. But she thinks she hears Trucker, and then the power goes out. So she thinks that he's in the basement, maybe like doing some work or something. So she calls down, and then somebody pushes her down the stairs. There's those stairs again, knocking her out completely. When she comes to, she's injured, sort of lying at the bottom of the stairs, and the gas is on. So she manages to stumble around and find the valve and turn the gas off. And then she breaks a window sort of to let air in, and she climbs out the window. But when she gets outside, somebody's waiting for her. And he admits to killing Giselle. But the thing is, she's climbed out that basement window. So she's kind of lying down kind of thing. And whoever it is puts his foot on her back. So she sees his little sneakers, but not who he is. He tries to strangle her with a rope because she figured out that the murder wasn't suicide. And he tells her he was basically a controlling jerk who killed Giselle because she got away from him. Basically, she went away to college and he was like, didn't like that. And she sort of stopped answering his messages not messages, they didn't have messages then, stopped answering his calls and letters. So she struggles and she grasps like a shard of glass from the window and she cuts him. But he's kind of overpowered her when a car pulls into the driveway and the headlights scare him off. It's actually just a car like pulling in to turn around. Apparently seeing a guy sitting on a girl and strangling her like right in the beams of the headlights is just an everyday occurrence, and it doesn't stop them. They just drive off. So he's gone, but Jess is still on her own. Everybody else is out. There's no one to help her, and the killer is on the loose. But who is he? So she didn't recognize his voice, oddly enough. Her friends come home and find her just coming to in the driveway. There's some serious head trauma at this point, but no one mentions her getting medical help. Instead, she just tells them what happened. Trucker hits the breaker switch, so they have light again in the house. And she tells them about the cool orange laces that the guy had in his sneakers, the guy that attacked her. So apparently at this point, she mentions that they're glow in the dark, which I want glow in the dark shoelaces. I think that's awesome. But yeah, apparently everyone on campus has them, including almost all of the dorm mates in the house. And at this point, I was like, do they all just have the same sneakers as well? Like, did everyone just have the same pair of sneakers in 1993? Because she saw the sneakers, so she should be able to eliminate. Anyway, surely that would narrow it down a little bit more. But anyway, towards the end of the book, it's fine. They suddenly realize Milo isn't there with them, and Jess searches his room because that's the logical next step. She's meant to be soaking wet from being like outside in the rain. And she puts a letter in her pocket, the letter from before. And I just thought, wouldn't it be ruined? She's soaking wet. Like, I don't know. Anyway, she insists on searching the room and she finds the letters that were Giselle's. So they all read them. We get a few of them like in the text of the book. Jess says she thinks that Giselle was probably murdered. Like, what? I feel like that's almost like a typo. Like, what? Duh. Obviously, she was murdered. Literally, every time everybody says it was suicide, something happens in the house. There's threatening letters. There's that photo. And literally, a guy told you that he murdered her and that she was his girlfriend who tried to leave him. So, I don't get it. Linda is shocked. Milo is not there, so he must be the bad guy, right? So then he just appears in the doorway and he's like, I was at the library all night. And everyone just accuses him, which we kind of know because there's a bit of the book left. He's probably not the killer. Linda points out that anyone could have left the party, which is kind of fun. Kind of leaves it open still. But she's pretty sure that Milo didn't do it. Milo decides to bail since they all think he's a killer, and he kind of packs up some of his stuff. He points out they have no real evidence against him and are kind of being jerks, which it's not a not valid point. So then it's just a week later, night of the ball. Jess takes that juncture to decide to pack his stuff. And Trucker and Linda are like, I'll help you do it. So I kind of wondered before these letters why they didn't compare the handwriting of the letters with anyone living there. I mean, that kind of seems obvious. Maybe like compare it to Milo's writing. But then Jess finds a typewriter in Milo's wardrobe. And this is where I hear that the letters were typed. I swear they didn't mention this before, but I mean, who cares? We're having fun. It's fine. Linda mentions that Milo has said to her he didn't know how to use a typewriter. I kind of love this. 1993, people still using typewriters. I kind of like that. So A, how does this come up in conversation, Linda? That's what I want to know. And B, who doesn't know how to use a typewriter? Like, it's a typewriter. It's just a keyboard, but you put paper in it. It's probably like easier to use than a computer, realistically. So yeah, Jess tells Ian and she's like, let's go to the police. The first time somebody has said that we should do this, the most sensible thing. And Ian's kind of weird. He's like, these are not clues. This is not a big deal. It's time to go to the dance. So the girls were like, okay, a man has spoken with his voice of reason and logic. And yeah, they just decide to get ready. I love this. Kath's dress is described as like a pale blue cloud. She's wearing a pale blue cloud. And there's a funny little moment. So she says she feels wasted going in that dress with lame Peter Oakes. Who is Peter Oakes? Whoever that is. It's a little bit harsh. I don't know what's wrong with this guy. She agreed to go to the dance with him. He can't be that bad. And one of the girls that's there, like they're all getting ready together, she's like, you might meet somebody else at the dance. So like, don't be negative. Can you imagine like the worst date ever for Peter Oakes, who is always referred to by both names? We don't know who he is. And when we do get to the dance, she does end up dancing with John a bunch. Like it's just so mean. It's just funny. So yeah, poor Peter Oakes. To quote again, poor Peter, Jess murmured, even as she returned John's grin. Who's Peter? Ian asked. Nobody. That's the whole quote. It just cracked me up because then Peter Oakes is never mentioned again. He's just nobody. This poor nobody who asked Kath to dance. He's probably a very nice guy, but we'll never know. I wonder if he's in any of the other books in the series. That would be kind of cool. I would like that. Yeah. So Trucker turns up alone at the dance. Bit of drama there. He sort of walks in the door and everyone's like, oh, Trucker in the doorway. And apparently he looks good enough to eat. He's described as looking like Tom Selleck. Tom Selleck just makes me think of Magnum P.I. because that was his one of his shows. I don't know. It's just funny. Jess walks home with her date Ian and they stop outside. Everybody else has gone out for something to eat, but the two of them have kind of peeled off to have a little time together. Alone time together in these books means sitting outside on the stoop and having a little chat. Nothing too raucous or exciting. He goes inside to get her jacket, which is a bit chilly. And she's like, yeah, you'll find my jacket. It's on the floor. Which I kind of loved. It's very teen. Like, it's on the floor. She's funny. She says, it will look smashing with my velvet dress and heels. Like, really awkward dialogue there. But yeah, while he's upstairs, a girl just turns up at the house. And she's bringing back Milo's jacket. And she basically just alibis Milo. So now we know Milo didn't do it because he really was at the library. So he couldn't have been the guy that did the other thing. So it's very convenient that she turned up right at that time. And then Jess, who appears to not be able to recognize voices at all, she hears someone call her from the creek behind the house. So Ian has gone inside and upstairs, but somehow she assumes that Ian is down by the creek now. So anyway, she just blindly heads down there, and Trucker is down there. So, yeah, he's put a photo of Giselle on a rock and says that Milo did it. So, like, what is this? Trucker is down by the creek, and he's got a photo of Giselle on a rock, and he's like, look, Milo put a photo on a rock. And you're like, and that is apparently meant to prove to everybody that Milo killed Giselle. He's the killer. But, like, he's not the killer, because we know he's not. And I'm not sure what that proves. But he could just immediately read Jess's face and be like, oh, okay, she doesn't believe me. And she sees that he has a cut on his neck from her piece of glass. And I was like, how would you hide that? How would you not have seen that before? There would have been blood everywhere. Like, this doesn't make any sense. But anyway, he does what people do in these books. He tells her his whole evil plan. And yeah, I like this character. I like the way he's drawn and created. He's the spooky handyman sort of guy. For a short book like this, I really like the way Diane Hoh created the backstory where he talks about the relationship between him and Giselle. And like, because it's from his perspective, how he saw it, he sees like that murdering her, it's like, it's not his fault. And he got her at a time when she was dependent and kind of vulnerable. And I just think it's, for a little book like this, where it doesn't really matter, I guess, it's actually pretty well drawn, toxic relationship, or, you know, the kind of relationship where sometimes it does end like this. So out of a very, I was going to say unrealistic book, but that sounds a bit harsh. I don't mean that in a bad way. It's a pretty realistic scenario. We sort of learn through the course of the book that Giselle's mother was terminally ill and her dad was sort of caring for her. So she got a bit ignored and sort of sidelined for a bit, but also whilst going through the pain of losing her mother. So I don't know, it's kind of interesting. So then kind of a cool thing happens. I sort of liked this. It's kind of lame as well. Hear me out. So he's advancing on Jess to kill her. But then the photograph on the rock just blows off, and it like suckers itself, like sticks to his face. So it sort of suffocates him, and he kind of takes a step back trying to peel it off his face, and he falls and he cracks his head. And where his face should be, because he's dead now, probably should have mentioned that in a more dramatic fashion. But yeah, he hits his head, he dies, and where his face should be, the photograph is like plastered there and it's smiling. And I'm like, that is really creepy imagery for a book. I think in a movie that would probably not really work and look kind of lame, but it's pretty good imagery for this kind of book. I don't know. It's also kind of dinky, like it's a photograph, death by photograph. Anyway, Milo is there. He's come to her rescue, even though I guess he doesn't really need to because Trucker is dead. And I guess the implication is that Giselle killed her killer via the photograph and saved Jess from dying. Milo tells us how he sort of put the clues together and figured out who Trucker was. And then he came back. He let Ian out of the cupboard where the killer had kind of tied Ian up, and so he couldn't come and rescue Jess. I don't know why he didn't just kill him, but whatever, it doesn't really matter. Amusingly, turns out Trucker is not his real name. Is Trucker even a real name? I guess you can call your kid whatever you want. But I would have assumed if I met somebody who introduced himself as Trucker that he was, that was a nickname. I don't know. But the photo at this point peels off Trucker's face and floats away down the stream. Goodbye, Giselle. Rest in peace. They apologize to Milo for accusing him, as they should, and the house seems to take a deep sigh as they return towards it, and there's just a vibe change. Doesn't feel like it's haunted anymore. All is well. So, yeah, as an adult reading this book, it's a super quick read, but the story works. I kind of liked it. The group of teens with their sort of basic outlines, maybe their sort of types or stereotypes a little bit, but not too much. They kind of feel familiar in a good way. So you can kind of just get into the story. And the tropes of the haunted house and the mystery of what really happened there are pretty good. The teens all being like good looking, as they call it, and having crushes was pretty cute and appealing. You know, Kath likes John, Linda likes Milo, Jess likes Ian. It's cute, and you kind of adds a little dynamic to the book, which I just liked that. The little bits about, leaving home for the first time and how that feels and kind of growing up, that was kind of cool. I kind of like that. It's not heavy-handed. It's just a little thing that's sort of mentioned a couple of times. It's a simple approach. There's not complex dialogue, but the atmosphere, there's plenty of it. The house is awesome. I loved it. Little supernatural touches, the kind of fun little misdirects of like, oh, everyone's a bit sinister, everyone's a bit suspicious. I laugh at this book for being so teen and so of its time, but it's a good read for the age group it was like marketed for at the time. And I kind of wonder if this one was a bit of a favorite amongst readers in its era. If you read this or any of the others, I would love to kind of hear what you thought. In the back of this book, there's a chapter from the next book in the series. I used to love when they did that. A few of these series would have that, like a little teaser for the next book. And I just think it's fun. Now, when I see that in a book, it annoys me because I don't really want to read a chapter from another book. I just don't. I just want to read the book, or I don't, I don't know. But I used to love it in this era. And there's also lists of other books in the series. It's quite long. There was a list for point crime and point sci-fi. I don't know how long-lived those were. And I don't remember hearing about them at all. They were obviously sort of cashing in on the point horror popularity, which is cool. But point horror was pretty big. I think most people sort of heard of it or whatever. But yeah, overall, this was good fun. I really enjoyed reading this, and then some of the funny little moments, the kind of dinky dialogue, or some of the little scary bits were good. And I was kind of left wondering if Kath and John ever got together. That was my big takeaway. If you've read any of this series, please let me know. And if you want to recommend anything really in this kind of book fair kind of vibe, please go right ahead. You can check out some of my other videos. I also have another channel and socials, so you can find links below if you want more of that. And if you want to hang out again, remember to like and subscribe. And you can always leave a comment, let me know what you thought, or let me know what else you might want to see. Thank you.